Hello, and welcome to the Citizens of Craft podcast, where we explore the objects we love, the reasons we love them, and the people who bring them to life. I'm your host, Megan Black. One of the best things about this podcast, for me, has been getting into the heads of our guests and exploring what makes them tick. What intrigues them about craft? What captures their attention? What takes their breath away? And what do they find themselves contemplating on a regular basis? It is their obsessions that fascinate me. And on today's episode, we go one step further down this road as we explore the two-sided nature of material obsession. How consumer society has developed an unhealthy obsession with material objects, and how craft artists use their material skills to encourage an object-driven alternative. Today's guests are two emerging professional craft artists, both relatively recent graduates of college and university programs in Eastern Canada, and both with a practice that explores their connection to and appreciation for the natural world. Joining us today are Tamika Knutson, an Indigenous jewelry, mixed media, and metal artist, and a member of the Tron-Tahutchin First Nation living in Dawson City in the Yukon, as well as Allison Green, a textile and mixed media artist living in Fredericton, New Brunswick, who not too long ago won the Sheila Hugh Mackay Foundation's Nell Udemans Award, celebrating the adventurous, creative spirit of emerging artists. It is a delight to bring these two youthful perspectives together for today's episode, where we explore the Citizens of Craft manifesto statement: you are not automated, manufactured, or cloned. You weren't made in a factory, so you prefer not to bury your life with things that are. Let's jump in together with Tamika Knutson's gut reaction to this special statement.
Oh, it's super important. I mean, I just feel that when we're making things, sometimes like I don't really even know where these ideas are coming from, but I think it's coming from, some subconscious place inside of me, and to be able to communicate that through an object, I think is just completely special and unique, and obviously, that is it's like that for every person. That's obviously something that is special to each person. Oh, sorry, that's a hard question.
It is a big question, but I think you're kind of getting at it, the idea that like you aren't some sort of robotic thing. You don't just flow through life without thinking about ideas or feeling or connecting with people. So, being able to listen to what's inside of you
Mhm.
and help craft get that out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Allison, what were your thoughts when you kind of heard that first statement? You were not automated, manufactured, or cloned.
I really like that idea that Tamika said about us being unique and having these unique voices. It really kind of made me think of, you know, this photoshopped idea of perfection that we're kind of bombarded with. We're expected to look a certain way, or we expect ourselves to look a certain way, and maybe we expect our lives to look a certain way. And you know, I find that with craft, you have to really accept all the imperfections. They're not,
Mm.
they don't detract. They're really like a birthmark. So I guess factory-made objects to me just seem like they don't have any complexity, or they're just too perfect, and I can't relate to them because I'm not perfect.
Oh, I love that.
Mhm.
And I think there's something about, like you mentioned, factory-made objects, or they feel like they're just there to take up space, whereas I think crafted objects are there to inhabit space. They're there for a reason. They didn't just kind of appear to appeal to someone's, instant moment of necessity. They're there to be a part of our lives, really.
Mhm. I really like what you said. Craft has imperfections, because I think that's that like when you're making a piece and you screw something up and you kind of get frustrated, or I don't know. I just think that is also where we discover sort of techniques or ideas that a mass-produced object would never get to, or be able to communicate, or just ever kind of compete with.
Yeah, I agree. Like we're always very self-critical of errors and mistakes, but sometimes later we realize that if we hadn't made those mistakes, we wouldn't end up with all the learning.
Absolutely.
It's that whole idea of happy accidents, right? Like,
Mhm.
what do you learn out of that? How do you grow out of those?
I don't know if they're happy. They're definitely frustrating. But I mean, once you move past that, then it's better. But you have to get past that.
So in the world that we're living in right now, we're inundated really with messaging that kind of promotes an obsession with materiality. And Allison, you mentioned this kind of photoshopped world, this capitalist marketing strategies. They generally target the public with the suggestion that like the status of objects or even the sheer volume of them, like this more culture, that matters more than what they mean or what they are or what they're made of. So really, like, society is often being sold this ideal, this kind of mass-produced promise that if you buy this thing, then you matter or it'll make you happy. So I mean, we're all living in this, and especially as young women across the country, we all kind of deal with this capitalist system that we're all working in. So how does this experience impact how you feel in general, and particularly how does it affect what you do in the craft world? We'll start with you, Allison.
I guess that's a big question.
Mhm.
It's affected me different ways at different points in my career. I'd say earlier on, I was more intent on pleasing everyone. So the work that I made, I really felt like it had to be appealing to the masses. Um, but I came to realize that when I made something that I really cared about, it might only appeal to a handful of people, but then I would get to have these amazing conversations with those specific people. So I guess caring more about what particular people think rather than everyone or society. I think too that people, they don't deliberately make the choice not to support craftspeople. I think they just don't really understand the difference a lot of the time.
hmm
They see like these handmade or things that say they're handmade in stores, and they don't understand the difference between the craftsperson down the street who made a mug and the mug that says handmade at these big box stores. And they don't understand the negative things that may have happened for that um, mass-produced mug to be $10, right?
hmm
So I think it's about teaching people more than it's about um, yeah, explaining to them the difference.
hmm And connecting the person back to the object. I mean, it's so easy to just go to like Walmart and everything that you need is there, and you just buy it off of a shelf. But like like when you see that object, you don't like automatically associate it with hey, that gun made that cutting board. And I think craft does that. You see the person sitting behind their craft table with these objects that they've been working on for I don't know how long. Like this is something that they've built up, and
I like where you're going with it though, because the idea of connecting the maker to the object, I think that does make a big difference. It takes the anonymity out of the experience of the
mhm,
object. Maybe tell me a little bit about a time in your life when you've had that experience, when your work is either on display somewhere, whether it's a gallery opening or a craft sale, and you're selling work directly to the public or you're engaging directly with the public. Have you had an experience where you saw that light bulb go off, where you saw that change, or something along those lines happened that you thought was memorable?
well, I mean, like even at craft fairs, like I'll like somebody will ask like, "Oh, how much are these earrings?" And I'll tell them the price, and their reaction is sometimes kind of like, "Oh my goodness, like that's a lot of money." And it's like, and so getting that opportunity to just like explain, all of the work that goes into, making this object here right in front of you. I think just having those conversations or that experience there is educational for both myself and the consumer.
And Allison, you mentioned also, like, maybe you've had that experience at craft shows in particular, but you also mentioned having done a residency. I think you've both done residencies in the past where that connection to the public is sometimes a big part of that. Have you had an experience during maybe perhaps one of those residencies where you had an engagement with someone that sparked a memory for you?
I've definitely seen that with children. They come up and they can't fathom that you would spend so much time, and that you know it would take you all that time to have that one small outcome. Um, and I think that's really valuable to show children really young, so that they have that idea in their heads that objects take time and they should take time.
Hmm.
But I've also had the experience of having that switch go off in my head, in regards to food, because I started purchasing eggs from a farmer at the market, and just the experience of buying from a person and knowing that that was their livelihood. Um, that was I just had an experience of, wow, I should be buying all my food locally. I think that's waking up with food for a lot of people, but we can extend that to other local goods.
Tamika, you were telling me before about a residency program that you did in the United States.
Hmm.
Why don't you tell me a little bit about that experience and where it was and what you did as a part of it?
Oh, so I went to Aspen, Colorado, for a week, and I got to explore the wilderness in Aspen and hike around and kind of get inspiration. It was for um, Artist in Wilderness by the Wilderness Workshop, or organized by Mary Dominic, or at least I was in touch with her the most. Um, and it was really great. Yeah, no, I spent the whole week hiking around Colorado and just taking a lot of pictures and getting inspiration. And now, for the past month, I've been working on work inspired by that visit. And so once that's done, I'm going to send it back to Aspen. And then what they'll do is they'll auction that piece off, and then all that money or funds, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, that will go towards preserving the wilderness in Colorado. So it's pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
And what does that kind of experience where you take the time, you kind of take a moment to step out of, you're really stepping out of in a lot of ways that consumer society that we've been talking about. You're kind of taking a break from all of that and giving yourself time to reconnect. How important was that?
I think it's totally important. I mean, without those distractions, you can kind of actually pay attention to everything other than your phone. I don't know. Just like, yeah, I think it's super important, especially for artists. I mean, that's where we get our creative juices from.
Allison, would you say you've had a similar experience like that?
I would, yeah. A couple of years ago now, I took part in the Beneath the Surface residency, which was at Fundy National Park, and that was our local craft council put that together, and it was a very similar experience where we went out and hiked the park and had guides to tell us all about it and answer any questions that we had. We had many, um, and that really it really sparked uh, making work that I cared about. Having that quiet, even with other artists around, it got me in touch with what I wanted to make.
Hmm.
And full disclosure, I was also involved in the Beneath the Surface program last time around in the last cycle, and it's revving up again this next week. Actually, I believe that Beneath the Surface program is happening again in Fundy. But yeah, I think it's interesting that you both had an experience that, although different and in different locations, the intention was the same, which was to kind of break out of the everyday society and take time for yourself. You've been listening to the Citizens of Craft podcast, produced by the Canadian Crafts Federation. For today's special segment, The Topic at Hand, we want to delve further into the important role that the provincial and territorial craft councils play in building the Canadian craft community. These organizations promote, support, and celebrate craft in their regions and help to build a sense of community among craft artists. In partnership with the many guilds, foundations, schools, and galleries across this country, craft is strengthened by the collaborations that come from engaging with this community. And individual artists can gain so much by being involved. But don't take my word for it. Listen to Monique Martin tell her story about how the Saskatchewan Craft Council made a difference for her.
Hi, I'm Monique Martin, and I live in Saskatoon, and I primarily work in printmaking, but I do a lot of installation work. I also work in clay. Mostly I try to comment on societal issues. I think the Craft Council community becomes large for me because they accept the ideas behind my work. My work isn't always functional and not even stuff you really even hang on the wall. They believe in the big idea, and they believe that craft can make social change. And I think that in itself is huge for Saskatoon, that they see craft in that bigger, broader scope. They gave me that confidence to take risks, try the untried, like putting children's art in trees all the way along Broadway, outside the gallery. They've really developed, maybe developed me, but they've given me the strength underneath, a foundation, I guess, to go, I can do this. I can do this. If they believe in me, then other people will believe in me. And it's just kind of exploded. It's large in part to the Craft Council. You know, those first few exhibitions and even the smaller exhibitions they have where they call for art and you're pushed to think outside your comfort zone. I think that's big, is that they ask for new work for exhibitions. They don't just want you to keep putting in the same thing. Try something new, do something outside your comfort zone, which I enjoy also. But without the Craft Council, I wouldn't be the artist I am. There's no way. It's a network of people that believe in craft. They believe in the act of creation that isn't standardized, run it off the mill, at a factory. And that in itself is a powerful energy. They are excellent at creating those opportunities that you couldn't create on your own or have difficulty creating on your own. I'm very big about putting my art where it doesn't belong. That's kind of who I am. But most emerging artists are not comfortable with that. So it's just a way to break in and somebody kind of to hold your hand.
Craft councils, guilds, galleries, schools, government departments, foundations, and many other organizations undertake a lot of work to keep their craft communities engaged and connected. Consider supporting a craft council in your region or join your local craft council as a member to experience this connectivity for yourself. Learn more about the many craft councils and affiliate organizations doing this great work across Canada by visiting CanadianCraftsFederation.ca. Now, back to our main interview with textile artist Allison Green and jeweler Tamika Knutson. So I want to change directions a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of a 180 here, but I want to bring up a pop culture example of a couple of the things we've been talking about already, which is that disconnection between the general public and the things in their lives, or the disconnection between their experience with objects and that meaning. So that pop culture example is The Joy of Tidying, which was recently a big hit on Netflix. So have either of you seen that show, The
Yes.
Joy of Tidying?
Yeah.
Well, what were your, well, I guess I should explain it a little bit just in case there's anyone who hasn't seen it or hasn't heard of it. I don't know what rock you might have been living under if that's the case, but it's sort of been everywhere. So the show, The Joy of Tidying, it's based on the principles of Marie Kondo's book, which was called The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And she basically encourages people to respect objects and their meaning and the purpose, rather than just hoarding a bunch of stuff or just disrespecting it in your home by not taking care of it. So it kind of seems odd to bring up a show about cleaning when we're talking about the themes of craft. But I found when I was watching it that you could really see right on the faces of the people who were involved that this might have been the first time that they even thought about how these objects were a part of their lives. So you've both seen it. What kind of were your reactions to that? Did you see a connection there between how you feel about craft and how these people were experiencing the objects in their lives?
Yeah, no, I love it. It just, I don't know, yeah, it's important for us to kind of wake up and remind ourselves to own things that we love, and more is not necessarily better, and take care of the things that you love and use them. And like when you were talking about your mom owning moccasins, like, yeah, she should definitely wear them, and use them until you can't use them anymore. I just when we it's not beneficial for us to own a bunch of things that we don't care about. There was this quote by what's his name? Sandra Olfoldy talks about him all the time. William Morris.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. What does he say? Oh my god.
Is it have nothing in your home that you don't believe to be useful or beautiful?
Yes.
Something
Yes.
like that. It's very close.
Oh yeah, that's the one. And I think that's so important. Yeah, we just need. I mean, it's sweet that it was on Netflix and like the whole world could see it, because everybody needs to hopefully follow that or aim for that.
I feel like it was a much more positive representation of object connection than like hoarders, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we shouldn't shame people for owning things, but like own things you care about.
Mm-hmm. Allison, what were your thoughts on the public reaction to something like that?
I really liked that she thanks the house and thanks the objects when she gets rid of them or when she keeps them. It's this idea that they've served their purpose or that they have purpose. Really liked that. I think it's great that people got excited about the show. In our house, we both have different skills that we bring to the table, my husband and I, and so when I look around our house, it's filled with these really purposeful objects that we made or that our families made for us, and um, we're just really grateful to have these objects. I don't even have to try to care about them, but it makes me think that there's also all these other objects in here that we probably don't need. It's good for everyone to be thinking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely the first time I saw that show, I thought, I don't need to watch this. I love craft. I love objects. I think about everything in my home all the time. But the experience of seeing how other people engage with it, I think gave me a new way of thinking about how to communicate with people about it. And my drawers are a little bit cleaner now.
Yeah, I flopped all my clothes onto my bed. It's like, do I love you?
But I think as a curator too, the idea that you want to see the things that you own, and you mentioned it, Tamika, like don't have things that you just don't like or don't appreciate, things that you want to hide away, and I can't think of why it would be useful to hide something away that you don't want or care about, so much so that you forget you even have it. So we've kind of spiraled down the drain in this obsession with objects. So here's a big question: why do you think? And we've danced around it a little bit, but the big question is, why do you think that owning something like a ceramic dish that was made by someone in your community, or a pair of earrings that was made by someone in your community, over something that you just picked up at the dollar store because you needed a thing? Why do you feel like a positive connection between those objects? Allison, we'll start with you.
I guess if you buy a piece of craft that you have to pay a little more for it, and that's a good thing, because sometimes you save up or you look for the exact object that you're looking for. So you just buy one really beautiful woven blanket and then you love it and you cherish it, and maybe you pass it on if you took really good care of it, but you feel really satisfied with it. So it doesn't leave that hole in you like buying mass-produced things can. It kind of fills you up, and every time you look at it, you're happy and you remember that you took the time to find that particular object that you wanted. I know, like when I buy pens, sometimes I'll buy a big box of really cheap pens and then I lose them everywhere. But if I buy one really nice pen, then I carry it with me and it lasts me way longer than a whole box of pens. So it's kind of the same thing.
That's a good example.
Yeah, that is a good example. From the earring community, I think that that's something that could really be expressed as well. And I'm the first to confess that I've probably lost more handmade earrings than I ever want to admit. I have this little graveyard of single earrings that I keep at home just to have mementos of the beautiful things that have gone astray. But from someone who's making jewelry, we're inundated with jewelry in a fast fashion style world. So why do you think that or why for yourself, like why does it matter for you when you're choosing that as something that you want to engage with or choosing something that you want to make? Like why do you make things like that, Tamika?
Make things like jewelry?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, you can wear it wherever you want. It's kind of like a art that travels with you. And like if I'm buying somebody else's art, I'm supporting them and I'm promoting their work, and I don't really see a downfall. um, yeah, I mean, there's this Marilyn Jensen. I did a workshop with her, and she said something really cool about having all of this work that was made by other people, and she said when she wears their work or is wearing a bunch of people's work, it feels like her community is with her, and I thought that was really beautiful.
I love that.
Yeah, and just to be able to support this person financially, whatever, but also to carry a little bit of them around with you. I think that's really beautiful as well.
Yeah, that's a gorgeous sentiment to think about because you really do. You kind of take a little piece of that person who made that object, a little piece of their energy around when you wear it. So I want to shift gears just a little bit, but it kind of leads from what you were saying about why you make or why you connect with these objects, and think about it less from the consumer side of things and more from the maker side of things. So I want to talk about that personal experience of the craft artist because it's not just about making things for other people or for the world. It's about that act of making itself. And I mentioned at the start those kind of two sides of this material obsession. So there's the disconnected obsession with stuff, and then there's this very hands-on connections to the material that you're actually using to make your own work. So, in this world where you kind of can, for the most part, you can buy anything. Like you can get anything that you need one way or another. Why do you, as an individual artist, why do you choose to make things? I'm gonna start with Allison.
I really make things in order to capture the things that I see. So I spend a lot of time just observing the world around me and mainly in my yard. When we moved here, I've realized there's just so much life here, and we just have an acre of land. And, if you multiply that by the entire world, there's just so much life. And so I've just been trying to take it in. So I use art as a way of studying life. So I first draw and then I kind of make a replica of insects and plants in textile. And that spending so much time with those organisms really teaches me so much about them.
Mm-hmm.
And Tamika, what's the big reason, sort of, or the smaller, more everyday reasons why you choose to make?
Honestly, I've just been making since I can remember, and I've just always done it, and I feel like I've always kind of had the drive to do it, and I'm not really sure where that comes from, but it's important to me, and I guess as I've kind of honed my skills, I'm starting to realize that it is kind of a tool for expression. Because, like I said earlier, I'll make something and people will read all of these messages in the piece, but again, like I don't even know what I'm doing half of the time. but then kind of later on, I can look back at that piece and see where they were coming from. So a lot of the times, it's kind of telling a story from within me that I don't really understand. So I guess that's why I make.
Can you tell me about, one of those experiences that you had, maybe like a revelation about the work that you had made before, and maybe you didn't know why you were making it right at the time, but what story did it end up telling for you?
When I started my lichen jewelry, it started as drawings, and I would just kind of explore these kind of really um, kind of wild little ecosystems and shapes and colors, and I couldn't really figure out where it started to come from, and then it started to kind of manifest into this, like into my jewelry, and then I would like look through my pictures on my computer, and I would see like all these pictures of lichen and moss and just all these little close up pictures, and I starting to make that connection between where my influences were coming from.
I have a question because I've traveled up north a couple times. I haven't been to. I've been to Whitehorse. I haven't been to Dawson City, but once you go kind of over the tree line, I guess.
Hmm.
My experience has been in Iqaluit mostly, but you kind of have this whole other experience in the north because the environment is different from the south. Obviously, there's different, there's a lack of trees. There's just a different environmental experience altogether. And I found myself taking so many pictures of like lichen
Yeah.
and little mosses and like tiny little
Hmm.
grasses and things. Do you think that maybe that lichen is a connection to that northern experience? And correct me if I'm totally way off base there because I'm not sure what the environment is like necessarily exactly where you grew up.
Hmm. No, I think you're kind of doing exactly what I was explaining before, where I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but then somebody else can kind of pull out the message that I was like kind of getting across to. Um, no, I think you're totally right. Yeah, I think that place, or like the tundra, has definitely influenced my work. Um, yeah, no, that's so funny.
It comes out in that final look, right? When
Yeah.
it's a reflection of you.
Hmm.
Alison, what would you say is maybe a piece or something that you have undertaken recently that is a reflection of you?
I recently created a spider, and it was a spider that lived in our house for the whole winter. So it started out, I was just making this spider just to reflect it. But then living with it on my wall, it's just inside my door, so I see it every day when I leave the house, and it's come to feel like an avatar, I guess. I feel like the spider, it is able to, spin the world that it wants. It can create physical space. It can change its reality all around it just by spinning a web. And it's a textile artist too, so I kind of try and, I don't know, channel
Uh,
the spider.
Hmm.
that's funny that you would relate to it because it's also a textile artist.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of a spider in that way.
Oh, me neither. I love that.
So, because you're both like relatively recent graduates and you're both forging your path into the relatively early years of an arts career, I think you've got a long way to go before for your full careers to ahead of you. Um, I think you have some really relevant life experience to share. Like the moments that you're living in right now are the moments that fresh-faced students who are just coming out of school or are just getting prepared for, or maybe second career craftspeople who are starting to turn into a new direction. They're kind of coming to the point where you are both at right now, and don't feel like you have to, say that you've got it all figured out. But based on your own experience and where you are right now, what do you think was the most valuable lesson that you learned when you were in school? And then on the other hand, what do you wish you had learned? So like what was helpful that you learned and what did you have to kind of learn the hard way on your own?
I think what I kind of came to learn at the end of art school is just giving myself permission to kind of um, express like my personal ideas, because I feel like before that I was making things that were, not really kind of giving myself permission to like fully let loose and make work that is about myself and my experience. Um, that's kind of what I learned in art school, is just, go for it. Take that risk and, you know, say what you need to say with your work. And oh my, what have I learned since art school?
Or what do you wish you maybe learned in art school that would have come in handy in the place that you're in right now?
Maybe more about business stuff. I I make this art and it's like, yeah, sure, great. But now if I sell it, there's all this stuff that I don't know about running a small business, so that would be helpful.
And Allison, what are your thoughts on that? What was something valuable that you learned in school, and then what do you wish you'd learned?
I think the best thing I came away with from school, and there were many things, but I learned to sample, to do all these test runs of everything before I really
Yes.
got into the finished piece. That way you don't feel like you have to be perfect the first time around, and you get to test things out and just have fun for a while. So that was probably the biggest thing I learned. What I wish I had learned was that my career would be pieced together from a lot of different areas. I work with several arts institutions, and I work in my studio and in my garden, and those are all really important parts of my career and how I, uh, get my messages across. And at first, I thought that they were conflicting areas of my life. So I wish I had known that they could be integrated.
Yeah, Tamika, I think you're having a similar experience, right? Where you're practicing, like you're making your own work and doing your own thing right now, but you're also working with arts organizations. So how has that changed from going from being a student to being someone who's kind of pulled in a couple different directions?
You know what? It's a little tricky. Yeah, no, I'm working at the government and as an arts advisor, and I'm so happy that I'm kind of still in the arts community and I get to be a part of that. But it is like obviously kind of slowed down my making. But I think there is a balance that can be found between the two, and I think it is important that artists are on the administrative side of making art opportunities in whatever community you're in. Um, so I'm definitely happy I'm doing it, and I just got a studio, so that's really exciting too. So I actually can find that balance finally. Um, yeah, I think it's great and it's an important.
Congratulations on getting a studio space there.
Thank you.
What's your next step in the studio development realm?
So I have to finish this piece for Aspen, or for the wilderness workshop that I did, and it's so close to being done. Ugh, almost there. And then after that, I'll be getting ready for Attica. It's this big cultural festival in Whitehorse, so that's my next step there.
Oh, very exciting. And Allison, what's next on the road for you?
I'm really excited to be taking part in a residency at the Fredericton Botanic Garden this summer. So I think that'll be really fun. I'm hoping it'll be kind of like fundy, but there's more of a public engagement component. So we're going to be doing some bug walks and things like that. Anyway, I'm really excited to spend some time in that garden.
That's right up your alley.
Right up my alley.
So I'm going to ask sort of one big question. I've only one, right? Like we haven't been dealing with all kinds of big questions today, but I kind of want to spin off of the residency experience that you've both been having, and I think what Tamika said earlier about the importance of artists being involved in the administrative sides of what's happening in art in communities is really important too. So, that act of being involved outside of your own making practice. If we focus on that, why do you think that is an important aspect of the future of craft? Like, why do you think it's important for artists to be involved, either taking residencies or working in fields that are related? Why do you think that the artist perspective or the craft perspective specifically is an important part of these systems that we're working within? Let's start with Allison.
This might be a long answer.
That's okay. That's okay.
Question. Well, I think it's, craft for me is a reminder to slow down and to value things that might not normally be valued. Like I often, my husband's a carpenter, and so we still value the trades, right? But there was a time when craft and trade they weren't separate. They were just all different people who had these valuable skills to give to the community. But at some point, we decided that we didn't need craftspeople anymore because we had this automation that would take care of all of that for us. But I think we need our craftspeople now. I think really they create things that are not just useful, but remind us of, like Tamika said, the person behind them. We live in these kind of bubbles, and we have all these mental health issues and addiction problems and all these things that stem from not feeling connected to our communities. And one part of that, I think, can be having objects in our home that remind us of people, remind us that we're people, and that the uh, people behind them are part of our world too, and part of what makes us us. Um, yeah, and I guess really, I don't know how to say this exactly. Like if I'm making something, it reminds me that I'm valuable. So I think teaching others to make, or even by leading by example, by making in our studios and by sharing that, um, we encourage other people to make. And then when they make something, they see that they've created something physical that wouldn't have been there without them, and that has a certain value to it. You know that you're valuable because you can make, and you can make things that endure, and there's kind of a record of you being there.
Thank you to Allison Green and Tamika Knutson for their bravery and their energy in today's conversation. It's not an easy task for two emerging craft artists to step out of their comfort zones and into the spotlight, but these talented women are a great example of the health and the vibrancy of the future of contemporary fine craft in Canada. And I, for one, am excited for everyone who is building their career in this field because they have so much to offer the world. I also want to thank the Sheila Hugh Mackay Foundation, whose support made today's episode possible. Their mission aligns perfectly with our intentions at the Canadian Crafts Federation to promote and support the creation, the valorization, and the understanding of the visual arts. The Sheila Hugh Mackay Foundation supports projects like the Citizens of Craft podcast, as well as awards, educational initiatives, grant programs, and arts advocacy, all focused in their home province of New Brunswick. Here, they do all they can to foster a culture of support, understanding, and value for artists, because they believe in what the arts gives back to the community. And I think everyone across Canada and around the world can be inspired by the spirit of Sheila Hugh Mackay and the foundation every day. The Citizens of Craft podcast is also thankful for the support of the Canada Council for the Arts, Voice Ed Radio, and of course, the many members of the Canadian Crafts Federation. If you are a maker or a lover of all things craft, make a local connection. Look up your local, provincial, or territorial craft council to learn more about craft in your region, and then learn more about the Citizens of Craft movement at citizensofcraft.ca. Join us again next time on the Citizens of Craft podcast, and until then, craft on.